Beto and Beto, thanks for joining us. Once again, we're continuing our San Antonio Forward podcast, and we have two really wonderful guests today. We have Beto Altamirano, CEO of Irys, a technology company. Beto Gomez, also co-founder of Irys. And then you all are both co-founders of Better Futures Institute, which is a nonprofit focusing on civic tech, right? So thanks to both of you for being here, for joining us. Super excited to talk today about the future of work. Beto Altamirano, you've written a really incredibly interesting commentary about what the future of work might look like in San Antonio and the South Texas region, extending into northern Mexico, and also kind of talking about this region as the future for economic development nationally, right?
Yeah.
Because of our ties to cybersecurity, our cross-border trade, the role of automation or technology development in manufacturing. So it was a fascinating op-ed. And so when you look at our kind of economic landscape, let's just start with, what you see as the strengths of the region. And then we'll pivot, of course, to the challenges, but there are certain strengths that you see economically that we should be tying into as we look at a workforce that's going to be radically changed by AI, quantum computing, things of that nature.
Well, Josh, first of all, thank you for the invitation to join you on this podcast. Thank you, Beto, and to be a guest on this series. I think we need more of this type of commentary that can illustrate and that can highlight, some of our strengths, some of our weaknesses, but also a vision forward for San Antonio and the South Texas region. And so thank you and the Express News for doing this. So first of all, right, I mean, when you think about the future of work, what's the first thing that comes to mind? What do you think?
Technology.
AI. What do you think?
I think of the robots coming to take everyone's job, like social uprising,
right?
How are people going to pay for things? Like I think of like total disaster, actually. And I have this joke about the future of work that like my existential crisis plate is already full.
Yeah.
So there's no, I can't even like contemplate the ramifications of AI. So that's my honest.
And I think a lot of people think about that, right? I mean, when I think about the future of work, I think about an informed perspective that organizations, businesses, city governments, state governments, federal government need to undertake to better understand how work is going to shift in the future. And the workforce strategies that we need to adapt to the challenges that we're going to face because of those working landscape changes, right? And I think that hysteria, that anxiety that both of you talked about, right? The robots taking over our jobs has been happening forever. You look back, 1920s, 30s, the 50s, 60s, right? There has always been anxiety around the concept of automation, right? I was reading the other day about the longshoremen, right? This was a job that existed back in the 1950s. And there's this big image where there's like 17,000 longshoremen activists gathered. I think it's in New York. And they're protesting against automation because it was the container revolution, right? Which substituted the employment of these folks that were docking and undocking, these ships. And so not a lot of people know what a longshoreman is today because that job doesn't exist anymore. It's true. That job disappeared. And I think a lot of jobs will disappear. But I think we should look at AI and automation as a leverage to create jobs, but not compete against it, against the progress that it's going to bring and the change and the impact that it could represent. So there's this report by the World Economic Forum, right, that says that about, I think, 83 to 85 million jobs worldwide will be automated, replaced by AI. And that's scary, right? And it's the same for that report that came out, it made the rounds, that 14% of the workforce in San Antonio is going to be replaced by automation and AI. Look, that's where we're heading. We're not going to stop this trend. We have to adapt to this trend. So again, it's not about competing with AI. It's about leveraging AI to create jobs, right? So when I think about the strengths of San Antonio, there's so many strengths to talk about, right? But geographically, we're located in a place that allows us to have proximity to Mexico, to build the relationship with another city like Austin that is experiencing a lot of growth and momentum in the tech sector as well. And you have the Gulf Coast as well. So you have this South Texas triangle that we're talking about, right? That's what the series is about, right? And I think we need to leverage that momentum moving forward. And one of the strengths that I see that San Antonio has to do a better job in marketing and in promoting is cybersecurity. That's one. And the second is biotech. But the question is, how can we adapt to those trends? How can we become a champion for those two industries here in San Antonio? So I make the case and I study 3 areas, right? Which is recruiting and attracting major enterprises. The second is reskilling and upskilling for Industry 4.0, so the fourth industrial revolution. And the last area where I focus on in this article is adapting and collaborating with the cities and the region as a whole. So I'll stop there.
Right. I mean, the article is, like I said, it's obviously it's super forward looking. And what struck me was it's incredibly optimistic, right? Yeah. That you sort of look at the built-in industries, I guess, of cybersecurity in particular, the coding, working with CodeUp and other tech infrastructure, right? To grow that, and then kind of combine that with how we can link across the border into northern Mexico and of course down into the Rio Grande Valley. So why don't you expand on that optimism? Because you end by saying you end by saying that San Antonio could be this model for the nation, that a model for you don't use the words literally economic development, but you talk about our cultural diversity and our ability to tap into these sectors to kind of show, I guess, how to integrate with technology developments?
I mean, I spoke about our geographic location being a strength, but the other strength that we have is our culture, right? And the embedded DNA that we have in working across ethnicities, right? But let me go back to highlighting why I'm optimistic about the future of work in San Antonio and as a region. Let's look back at Target 90. In the 1983, Henry Cisneros puts forward this bold vision of what San Antonio could aspire to become. And it was inspiring. And the preface to that plan is this article, which is like a newspaper article.
Right. It's a fictional article.
It's a fictional article, right? That says San Antonio sets the tone for international discussions. And so I think that was perfect for the 80s because we experienced globalism in the 90s, right? Due to the trade agreements that were spearheaded by Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, at the time Salinas de Gortari in Mexico, etc. But I think today we have achieved those international discussions. We got there. And fast forward in a similar way, SA 2020 doubled down on this idea of what the vision could become. And that was led by Julian Castro. And Julian Castro doubled down on education and having a strong workforce. But what both of them shared, Target 90 and SA 2020, was this vision for the future of work. And one way that Julian did it was through Launch SA, was through Cafe College. And I think those were bold ideas at the time. Fast forward today, we have experienced so much disruption. Post-COVID, things have changed forever. And you add the aggressive digital age that we're living in, and things have been completely disrupted. You talk about the great resignation or the great reshuffle, whatever you want to call it. It's happening. And people are deciding to work from home. And so where I see my optimism where it stems from is that I think as a society here in San Antonio, we are supportive of bold visions. We are supportive of each other and our industries, right? So when I talk about attracting emerging enterprises, I think collectively in the past, we've done a good job. I mean, we have the Valeros, the Rackspace of the world. We have the Geekdoms of the world that is incubating a lot of startups. We came out of Geekdom, by the way, right, in downtown San Antonio. So I think it's about being bullish with a new vision for San Antonio moving forward. But I think in order to attract emerging enterprises, right, again, why I'm optimistic is because you have multiple organizations, including Greater SATX, that is doubling down on the idea of also creating a culture, an ecosystem for innovation in San Antonio. And I think if we can achieve that, we're going to have a lot of new companies and a lot of young people stay or move to San Antonio because the quality of life is here. It's affordable. And it's a city that makes you fall in love with the idea that you can actually shape its future. Versus if you go to a city like New York or Austin, where you know that growth, that influence has already been capped. You have already achieved that, right? And so in San Antonio, you can still mold the future of the city. So that gets me really passionate about why I think we can not only retain talent, but we can welcome a new talent as well.
Let's talk about some obstacles though too, right? Because Target 90, that was in 1983. Julian Castro launches SA 2020 in 2010, right?
2010.
Here we are in 2023, right? And there are some consistent, I'm going to call them headwinds. Maybe that's not the right word. San Antonio throughout that period is basically one of the poorest, largest big cities. It's consistently, you go to Pew or any kind of think tank, it's consistently one of the most economic segregated, cities in the country. We lag other major cities in terms of college education.
And we're the third most impoverished metro. Yeah.
Right. 78207 zip code is historically understood as deeply impoverished, right? Hunger in America documentary in 1968, I think, or in the 1960s at least. So this has been consistent despite these ambitious kind of political or lofty ideals. So, when we talk about an environment that's disruptive, right? The pandemic or aggressive development in technology, how does the community navigate what these consistent challenges? We call them challenges, but these are actually people's lives, right? It's generational. To poverty is generational. Lack of education is generational. There are huge ramifications for opportunities that people have or don't have. Absolutely. So you talk about this, but how does that fit into how does that fit into the moment that we're embarking on? Let's say SA 2030, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, the article is called Forward 2030, right? Right. And it alludes to the title of the series, San Antonio Forward. Now, I think, Josh, you hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, as a city, I think we need to do more of exploration inwards, and we have to acknowledge our shortcomings. I think sometimes we don't like to admit some of those shortcomings, like being one of the most impoverished areas in the country. And we're doing a disservice by not speaking about it openly and publicly and finding solutions for them, right? And so when I think about the article that I wrote, I make a reference to what happened at the peak of the pandemic. A photographer from San Antonio Express News, what's his name again?
William Luther.
Amazing photo that he took that went viral, right, at the food bank, where you have long lines snaking their way into the food bank. And that photo went viral. I had friends from Europe, Mexico, texting me, like, hey, we saw San Antonio on the news. But we're getting known for the wrong reasons. And I don't want to be a city known for the wrong reasons. I want to be a city that is known for its economic and cultural potential. And so how do we fix this, right? It's a loaded question. And I make the case on several items, right? But let's talk about reskilling and upskilling. When I think about future generations, they are digital natives. And they are adapting to the trends that this aggressive digital information age is bringing upon us. However, when we look at what's happening in cities across the country, specifically, let's look at San Antonio, you have programs like Ready to Work SA, which I support 110%. And I support the mayor on this initiative. And I think that trade and technical jobs are crucial. They are critical. However, when we look at the demand that a lot of companies are driving in terms of skills, think of the Oracles, the Googles of the world, right? And that are driving a lot of automation and AI, they're looking for a different set of skills as well. So if we want to compete in the future, we need to double down on the trade and technical jobs, because those are not going to be replaced by automation or AI. But we also need to nurture other skills. And I talk about nurturing analytical, critical thinking skills, and innovation capabilities. And I don't think we're doing enough of that. And you refer to that idea that I mentioned about CodeUp partnering with the city or county. We need to do more of that. Look, the reality is that coding, it's also slowly going to disappear.
Right.
But leading and directing the machine, this AI machine, is not going to disappear. We're going to be completely dependable on each other. So imagine if we train for the future of work in a way that allows us today to be more bullish on the future by introducing skill sets to our community so that we can compete with other cities across the country, right? And so I make the case on upskilling and reskilling, because if we don't do that today, I think we're doing a disservice to our youth. And what happens then? Our youth decides to move from San Antonio, or we cannot capture that retention. Yes, I was optimistic about the quality of life and the idea of shaping the future of the city. That's great, and I think that's why I'm here. I think that's why Beto's here too. But the reality is that a lot of people might not be as civic minded as we are, right? And might choose to move to New York because maybe they can find a job there, right? And so if we're going to be training and we're going to be nurturing skills among our youth, and not only youth, but in general, our population in San Antonio, the other side of this equation is jobs. We have to secure jobs for San Antonio. And I don't think we're doing enough of that. And that's why I talk about attracting and recruiting emerging enterprises. We need to double down on that idea and be bullish and market the city so that more companies can move to San Antonio. And we cannot play underdog anymore. And it's not about competing with Austin or other cities. We have our own cultural value sets that allows us to sell the city in a way that becomes attractive to a lot of people throughout the United States. And I think we need to spend more time on the road. Our leaders need to spend more time on the road, marketing the city and nurturing that collaboration between cities.
What would those emerging enterprises be? You know, I mean, you identify them. I know the answer to this because I've read about that. But line, you know, what should civic leaders be focusing on if we're talking about recruiting?
Absolutely. So I talked about nurturing the analytical, critical thinking skills and innovation capabilities. I'm doubling down on the idea of cybersecurity and biotech. 110%. Those are core areas where we're gaining momentum. Yet, I spent a year in Cambridge. And I was studying there, and I remember talking to people about San Antonio. And not a lot of people know that San Antonio is a hub for cybersecurity. Why did I bring up cybersecurity? Because I was dealing with a lot of folks that were in military and that were getting their MBA. So they were thinking about technology and they were talking about cybersecurity all the time. Yet they did not know that San Antonio is a hub for cybersecurity. Now it's given, and the audience is going to pause and say, Beto, well, you don't market cybersecurity. Yes, I know, I understand. But there's a way to do it. And we're not doing enough of that, right? So that's what I refer on the article, right? That I think we need to double down on those two areas, because the other areas that are going to grow is quantum computing, right? And if you can leverage cybersecurity and biotech in the quantum computing world, forget about it. I think we're going to be a powerhouse in terms of technology and innovation in the United States.
You want to chime in or?
Well, I think another important point, in terms of making the city attractive is infrastructure, right? Like in order to attract these emerging companies and enterprises, you need to have a livable city, right? A city 100%. that offers a good quality of life for people to really, are willing to move their families thousands of miles, right? Or, a few miles to come to San Antonio, right? You need that attractive city that offers the
quality of life.
The quality of life, that's right. And so when I think also about how do we do that, and I say, investing in infrastructure, I think about, and this is going to come, later in the series, how important it is to have a good, like digital infrastructure, right? So when we talk about healthcare, which is one of the growing sectors, you have now all these opportunities of, healthcare employers, which is, regionally, this is one of the largest growing industries and sectors. And so by having a good digital infrastructure, you allow for all these people to have jobs and also to offer better, healthcare services to residents in San Antonio, but also in the region.
The access to internet, right? I mean, we are still experiencing the digital divide.
2023, we're talking about it, right? It's like it should be. It's a fundamental right, in the 21st century.
Well, I think obviously you both are in tech, right? So when you say digital infrastructure, you have a certain idea of what that entails, but a lot of people don't work in tech, right? So specifically, when you want a better digital infrastructure in San Antonio, right, to recruit or retain talent or companies, what is that? What is needed, right? What outline, like it's give me your grocery store shopping list, so to speak.
Well, I think it's just to have reliable access to internet, right?
Okay.
Broadband infrastructure. That's what I mean.
Right.
Right. Like to be able to connect. If you're, from your home, you're able to, open your Wi-Fi connection and connect and be able to access your classroom. Be able to, go to the doctor digitally. I mean, remember in the pandemic, right? We had this also another big case where the city, I can't remember who organized this, but they had essentially some school buses carrying modems, and they were driving around the city, being able to provide internet for the people that couldn't go to school, could do online classes.
Well, we had those huge challenges where even like districts were giving out laptops, but then at home there was no internet, right?
Yeah.
And so, and there's certain neighborhoods where internet accessibility was just non-existent. So it's strictly broadband infrastructure.
Exactly.
But is there something?
Yeah. No. I mean, look. I think I 100%. I agree with Beto, and especially because we're in tech, right? I mean, so if our employees don't have access to the internet, right, it's going to be really hard for them to work, right? But let's talk about quality of life. You need walkable, bikeable. You need more density communities here in San Antonio, right? I think a lot about the clusters that are happening in the city, and I talk about that in the article. Bruce Katz, he's an urbanist, former chief of staff of Henry Cisneros when he was HUD secretary, talks about this in his book, New Localism, where he calls them innovation districts. And I think in San Antonio it's happening. You can call them districts, innovation districts, clusters, whatever you want to call them, right? But it's happening slowly. It is a city that is spread apart, right? It's sprawling. And you have the Pearl District. You have the Blue Star Complex. You have Velocity, Texas in the east side. And the Blue Star Complex is in the Southtown area. You have the Commerce Corridor in the west side. You have the Rim and Stone Oak in the north side. And I think, they function, as a web of clusters. And of course, let's not forget the medical district as well. And I think that supports the quality of life in San Antonio. I think reaching that mass density, like Sao Paulo did, is going to be extremely hard. And that's I don't think that's where we want to head, right? Because our quality of life will be affected. But what we need to do is nurture these clusters, and they must have internet, of course. But going back to your question, I think it is digital infrastructure, but I think it's also infrastructure that is conducive to a quality of life that also creates an entrepreneurial ecosystem.
A big part of the series is looking at this region, right? The South Triangle region, South Texas triangle, right? And that's we jump back and forth between calling it South Triangle and South Texas Triangle because the region extends into Monterrey, northern Mexico, right? So from a Mexican perspective, it might be the North Triangle region, right? But I'm wondering if you can speak to how technology could be leveraged to connect various communities, right? Because each community has, whether you're talking about Laredo or San Antonio or Corpus Christi or Monterrey, has certain sectors that are particularly vibrant or a certain strength, right? And there must be a way to use the internet and working from home that's emerged from the pandemic to connect these sectors or to meet certain needs. Like just kind of speaking top of mind, we have a rural healthcare crisis. Right? We have hospitals that are closing. We have a lack of medical specialists in rural areas, but you could use telehealth, right? If there's internet connections, to get people some form of service. It might not be the exact same as in person, right? But it's a starting point. So how do you do that in a world of, we have trade, we have cybersecurity. How do you see these pieces connecting?
So that's my last focus area on the article, right? Which I talk about adaptation and collaboration. I think one of the biggest challenges, and we spoke about this before we started the podcast, is that the cities in South Texas, in the region, and the relationship between San Antonio and Austin, we tend to operate in silos. And I think there's more in common between these cities in this region, and between San Antonio and Austin than what separates us. And we got to stop thinking in ways that of competing with each other, but rather collaborating with each other. I think a lot about what Ricardo Hausman talks about. He's an economist, and he studies the wealth of nations, complexities in our economy, right? And he uses the product forest, right? He talks about the trees being representative of a product or service or good, and then the monkeys being the businesses or the corporations that jump from one tree to another. And he says that, where you find more productivity is when the trees are nearby. And to connect the trees, right, you need capacity and capabilities. So I go back to what I was talking about, reskilling and upskilling, right? So imagine if we can connect the trees between what is happening in Corpus Christi and San Antonio. What are the economic strengths of each region, and how can we leverage those strengths, right? Because I think that firms, businesses, corporations, and individuals, they specialize. And regions such as the South Texas region or cities in the South Texas region, they are focused on diversifying. And that's, I think, the key for us to advance economically. And to your question, can we do it with technology? Absolutely. We can definitely connect the dots, right? But we go back to leadership, right? San Antonio leaders and Corpus Christi leaders and Brownsville leaders, RGV, Laredo, you name it. Austin, we need to talk to each other and find ways where we can actually collaborate, economically speaking, where companies can actually build part of their products in San Antonio and maybe ship them to space in Brownsville with SpaceX. I think that's what is called the network science, right? And if we can achieve that through technology, through remote working, through collaboration, through adaptation, I think, we will be successful and we will compete, for the future of work.
All right.
Yeah. Partnerships as well. I think, when was it last week, I believe a delegation from San Antonio, like a business community, went to Monterrey. And, they were...
A big delegation. It was like 40 people. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, internet, that's a huge thing, right? Like the broadband infrastructure, like you want to be able to have, because that's the foundation. It's what allows networks of institutions in academia, in healthcare, in trade, industrial complexes, right? That's how you connect them. But then also you have to build the human relationships, right? You have to reach out and engage in conversations. And so I think that they actually were able to strike a partnership between Tec de Monterrey and
Tech
UTSA.
Millennium as well. Yeah.
So the Tech Millennium was, I think, for the technical skills.
Absolutely.
And Tec de Monterrey was more on the medical field. So I think they're going to launch the first joint medical program.
Which is fascinating.
It's fascinating. And those are the type of, I think, opportunities that should be pursued, that should be advanced. And those conversations should be encouraged more often. Because I think, by engaging through a regional landscape, we can build more of those types of success stories.
And what's the conversation that is happening about San Antonio and Austin? Everybody's talking about it. I mean, a lot of people, younger generations as well, on social media, you go to, Threads, Twitter, whatever, and people talk about San Antonio.
San
right?
Antonio.
But people talk about the train having speed rail from San Antonio to Austin, right? Imagine if that was a possibility, right? And this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about us being more intentional with building those bridges and those collaborative efforts between San Antonio and Austin and the rest of the South Texas region. If we were more intentional about collaboration in the past, that rail system would have already been built. Yes, it's given. I know the audience is going to pause and say, Beto, but Southwest Airlines and their lobbying and everything that went into that in the 80s, 70s. Yes, true. But you can still push for it, right? We had the 90s, we had the 2000s. Southwest Airlines is no longer just limited to Texas, right? There's an opportunity, but we need to invest in the future if we want to compete. But those are the conversations that need to happen, right?
Of course, I think so. I mean, you start building the future now, right? And so the best time to start is like right now, having those conversations. And I think, everywhere you go, you hear that. Right. You hear, hey, I would love to go to Monterrey by train, or I would love to go to Austin, and skip the I-35, hell, drive from hell.
It is hell. It is the drive from hell.
Horrible. I just drove this weekend, and it was you just have to be super focused. You get to Austin, you're super tense, right? By the way, Samuel Garcia, the governor from Nuevo Leon, keeps pushing this idea of a rail system between Monterrey and Laredo, Laredo, San Antonio. And I think Henry Cuellar, congressman, is also very supportive of that. Yeah. So the possibilities are there, right? It's just us being more bullish on the future and being more forward thinking, not limiting ourselves. And I go back to not playing underdog. I mean, we got to have a little bit of swag. It's that swagger. I mean, because we got to be proud of who we are, right? I mean, we are home to the Alamo. We are home to a Mexican-American culture that is very rich in tradition. We are home to the Spurs, right? Wemby just moved to San Antonio. We have a strong, robust economy. Yeah, it has its shortcomings, right? We have the impoverished issue going on right now in San Antonio, but we need to move beyond that. And we need to walk with a little bit of swagger and be more excited about the future of San Antonio.
Well, I appreciate you both coming in, speaking with us. It's an exciting commentary. If you're watching this, read it, check it out, and we'll keep the conversation going.
I have one more comment.
All right.
And because at the end of the article, I close with talking about San Antonio being the city of the future.
Right.
And I was inspired by a conversation that we had as a group, the Presidential Leadership Scholars, with President Bill Clinton, where I asked him a question about the state of affairs of our democracy. But before I asked the question, he asked me, well, where are you from? And I said, San Antonio, Texas. And he started talking about San Antonio for the next 5 minutes. And he said, San Antonio is the city of the future, where you have 2 Asian Americans leading the city and the county, and a 60% plus population that is Latino. It's a confluence of ethnicities, right, that have come together to move this city forward. And that's why I'm excited about this city. And I think our residents here in this city need to be excited, and we need to be more forward thinking.
Thanks to both of you. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.